And now Kiki D introduces the first in a three-part series celebrating the life and career of one of rock music's greatest composers and performers, the Elton John story.
Candle burned out long before legend ever did.
As the crow flies, Westminster Abbey is only a short distance from Pinner in Middlesex. But Elton John had come the long way round, on a journey to undreamed heights of fame and success, and down again in unimaginable depths of despair. It had been an astonishing transformation from shy, plump piano protégé to glamorous global superstar. But the trip had been a troubled one, played out over half a century, most of it in full public view. And Elton John was never more public than at Westminster Abbey on the 6th of September 1997, when he sat down at the piano to sing Bernie Taupin's hastily rewritten Candle in the Wind at the funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales. In the space of a few minutes, with a global television audience of 2.5 billion looking on, Elton's performance became the defining moment of the princess's funeral.
Goodbye, rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You are the greatest place to set where lives were torn apart. You called out to our country, and you whispered to those in pain. Now you belong to heaven, and the stars spell out your name. And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. Footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will.
Even for someone like Elton, who was accustomed to playing before huge crowds, singing that song on that day must surely have been the most difficult performance of his whole career. There was nowhere to hide, no choir or orchestra for support, no chance of a second take, just his piano, his voice, and the fear that by sheer force of habit he could slip back into the familiar old words of a song he'd been singing the same way for nearly a quarter of a century. Sir Cliff Richard.
When Diana died, which was a Sunday morning. I woke up and heard the news. And when I heard that Elton was going to sing, I thought, well, I don't know about this, because, you know, Elton had known her really well, maybe more so than I had done. I had met her a number of times and really enjoyed her company. But I thought, I don't think I could sing a thing like this. It would be too emotional, and so I don't know how Elton did it. I mean, he rose in my esteem no end, because it's a real tough thing to do if you're emotionally charged. I mean, I couldn't even sing the hymns. And all around me, we were all weeping. I mean, I'd openly weeping. That's what amazed. And I guess when you have that sort of atmosphere, you're not ashamed to weep yourself. And it was just a chance to sort of release all the frustration of a beautiful woman who, you know, nobody's perfect, but nobody deserves to die like that. But I couldn't have sung that day, you see. Now, Elton, I think, must have worked a way out. And I've looked at bits that he's done, and I think he read the lyrics, didn't he? I don't know whether he meant it, but it probably saved him from making a mess of it, because if you can actually look at something and think, okay, I've got new lyrics in, I've got to remember, I have to sing this right, this is a very important occasion, you can rise above the internal emotional problem of trying to express lyrics and breathing. But Elton sang it really well, and I was quite amazed.
With the eyes of half the world on him, Elton triumphed. Word perfect, he sang the new lyrics with feeling, but managed to keep his emotions in check until he had finished his tribute.
And it seems to me you've lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Candles burned out long before your legend ever will.
For many people, their first glimpse of Elton had come a quarter of a century earlier, when in January 1971 he appeared on Top of the Pops, looking young and very nervous, and singing Your Song.
It's a little bit funny, this feeling inside. I'm not one of those who can easily hide. I don't have much money, but boy, if I did, I'd buy a big house where we both could live. If I was a sculptor, but then again, no, or a man who makes potions in a traveling show. I know it's not much, but it's the best I can do. My gift is my song, and this one's for you. And you can tell everybody this is your song. It may be quite simple, but now that it's done, I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I put down in the words how wonderful life is while you're in the world. Out on the roof and kicked out the moss. Well, a few of the verses, well, they've got me quite cross, but the sun's been quite kind while I wrote this song. It's for people like you that keep it turned on. So excuse me for getting, but these things I do, you see, I've forgotten if they're green or they're blue. Anyway, thing is what I really mean. Yours are the sweetest eyes I've ever seen. And you can tell everybody this is the song. It may be quite simple, but now that it's done, I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind what I put down in the words. How wonderful life is while you're in the world. I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind what I put down in the words. How wonderful life is while you're in the world.
It was an unassuming beginning, but within a couple of years, Elton John had become the most exuberantly over-the-top pop star rock and roll had ever seen. Even during the outrageously flamboyant 70s, when glam rock ruled and the stars like Mark Bolan, Gary Glitter and David Bowie were teetering around on precarious platform shoes trying desperately to outdress each other, it was always Elton whose platforms were the highest. Elton, who always took extravagance to the extreme.
Country, fishing in a stream, looking for an answer, trying to find a sign, until I saw your city lights. Honey, I was blind. They said, get back, honky cat, better get back to the woods. Well, I quit in those days and my redneck ways. Gonna do me good.
However consummate the showmanship during those flamboyant years, Elton's public posturing served only to emphasize his inner discomfort. At heart, he was still shy and struggling to overcome his excruciating lack of confidence. And before long, rumors of drug abuse and wildly erratic behavior had begun to circulate. Other stars may try to conceal their problems for the sake of keeping up appearances, but Elton always seemed happy to talk about his problems, and over the years his audience have followed him every step of the way. And all the while, playing in the background, there'd been those unforgettable songs. The combination of Elton's melodies with the lyrics of Bernie Taupin had made them the most successful pop partnership since Lennon and McCartney. Together for over 30 years, they've fashioned ballads like Daniel, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, Someone Saved My Life Tonight, Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word, and the feisty rockers like Philadelphia Freedom, The Bitch Is Back, Benny and the Jets, I'm Still Standing, on which Elton kicks aside the piano stool, all of them long since woven into the fabric of our lives. Rock and roll fame, when it hits big, and by the mid-70s the music of Elton John accounted for an astonishing 2% of the world's record sales. Officially bigger than Elvis, the Beatles, or the Rolling Stones. In America, he enjoyed an unprecedented 7 consecutive #1 albums, and his 1975 album, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, became the first album ever to debut at #1 on the US charts.
When I think of those East End lights, muggy nights, the curtains drawn in the little room downstairs. Prima Donna, Lord, you really should have been there, sitting like a princess perched in her electric chair. And this one more beer, and I don't hear you anymore. We've all gone crazy lately, my friends out there, rolling round the basement floor. And someone saved my life tonight, Sugar Bear.
Over the past 3 decades, Elton's total worldwide record sales have exceeded 150 million, would you believe? Putting him second only to Paul McCartney as the UK's most successful music export. And the plaudits have just kept on coming. In 1994, Elton received the Oscar for Best Original Song for Can You Feel the Love Tonight from The Lion King. In 1995, he became a commander of the British Empire and was awarded the Polar Music Prize by the King of Sweden. In 1997, the re-recording of Candle in the Wind overtook White Christmas and Rock Around the Clock to become the best-selling single of all time. And to crown it all, the following year, Elton received his knighthood. Before we go any further, let's go back to the beginning. On the 25th of March 1947, Reginald Kenneth Dwight was born in his grandparents' house at 55 Pinner Hill Road, the only child of Stanley and Sheila Dwight.
I was born in Pinner, Middlesex, which is near Harrow. When I passed 11 plus, very little child I was, I went to Pinner County Grammar School. And while I was at Pinner County, I sort of went on Saturdays to the Royal Academy of Music on a sort of junior exhibition scholarship.
From an early age, Reg had 2 abiding loves, music and football, both of which would remain as constants throughout his roller coaster life. His interest in football was heightened when a cousin, Roy Dwight, secured a place playing for Fulham, although young Reg realised that his own chubbiness wasn't going to help him become the next Stanley Matthews. One thing at which he did excel was playing the piano.
I started playing when I was about 4, but I just sat down one day and started to play the piano. We've always had a piano in the house, and I just sat down and began to play. And the first thing I ever played was the Skaters' Waltz. I always remember that. So I was just sat down. It sounds like a miracle, folks, but I just picked it up very easily. I can't remember ever being sort of having to learn to play the piano. I just always played it. And then my parents said it would be a good idea if I was taught all the rudiments of music. So I went along with that, but I wasn't very happy with it. I didn't particularly like classical music. I never liked classical music as a child at all, but I did because I was more or less forced to. And then, as I say, I won a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music, and I was there for 5 years every Saturday morning, and I passed all my grade examinations. I wasn't a very good student. I was always a big fluffer. I could always just about get through on a bit of practice instead of not a lot of practice. And as I say, I wasn't that influenced. I just wanted to get out there and play Jerry Lee Lewis rock and roll instead of Chopin etudes, you know.
When he was 15, Reg's parents divorced, an event which made their shy, solitary son even more withdrawn, and sent him beetling back to his room, where he carefully chronicled the Football League tables and weekly pop charts, and neatly labelled all his records.
I left school at 17 because I hated school after the O-levels, and the sixth form was just a waste of time because by then I really just wanted to do, music as a full-time thing. But anyway, my cousin, who was a footballer, he was playing for Millwall then, and he knew some show business people, and I said to him, listen, if you ever hear of any jobs going, let me know. And he found me the job as a T-boy at Mills Music.
But by night, Reg Dwight was busy pursuing his own ambitions.
Actually, you see, I'm a pub pianist, really. I mean, because that's what I was. When I was at school, I was sort of in a semi-professional group at the time, playing through 120-watt amplifier. And on Friday, Saturday and Sundays, I used to go up to a pub called the Northwood Hills Hotel, near where I lived, and I played sort of My Old Man Said Follow the Band, and I used to sing Jim Reeves songs, and I used to earn a fortune because they used to pay me like a couple of quid a night, and then I'd get someone to take my box round, and I used to pack word got round there was music there, which there'd never been music there before, and we just sort of packed the place out. I packed the place out and earned a fortune, enough to buy a car and a radiogram and a television set and all those sort of things, and plus an electric piano and amplifier, so I really did well for a year. I hated it, mind you, because I was always petrified of all the fights and everything, but looking back, I don't know how I ever did it. Friday, Saturday and Sunday, playing My Old Man Says Follow the Band twice a night. It was just incredible.
It was the year Tommy Docherty managed Chelsea, and there was all the rumpus. I remember that because they were always nipping through our back window and jollying the press. Don't know why. That was at Mills Music in Denmark Street. And while I was there, we had an offer. Our band had an offer. We did an audition at the Kilburn State for one of London's more infamous agencies. And we passed, and they said, would you like to back Wilson Pickett? So he said yes. So we went to a rehearsal with Wilson Pickett, who never showed up. His guitarist had shown up, and he was obviously so disgusted with us he walked out. So we got dumped from Wilson Pickett. We never started with him. We went on to the Major Lance tour, and I can remember we bought all his records that were available and rehearsed for 2 weeks, all the numbers in the same key. And he came over and he said, right, let's rehearse. And we played all his repertoire straight through, and the poor guy nearly died. He couldn't believe it.
Bluesology had begun in 1965, and it was as a member of Bluesology that Reg Dwight made his recording debut, playing piano on a Fontana single, Come Back Baby, which was released in July 1965, just a few months after he left school. Words and music by Reg Dwight, the sheet music proudly noted.
Come back, baby. Come back to me, yeah. And you will see, yeah, how I've changed. 'Cause you're the only love that I ever had. You're the only love that I ever had. Come back to me. Come back, baby. I did you wrong, yeah. And now this song I sing, I hope will bring you back to me. 'Cause you're the only love that I ever knew. You're the only love that I ever knew. Come back, come back. Come back, baby. Come back and treat me right. Come back, baby. Come on back, I'll hold you tight. Come back, baby. Come back, I'll treat you right. Come back, baby. Come back, I'll hold you tight. Come back, baby. Everything's gonna be fine right now, yeah. It's gonna be fine right now, yeah. It's gonna be fine right now, 'cause you're the only love that I ever had. And you're coming back, and I'm so glad you're coming back to me.
More Bluesology records followed, including a second single, also written by Reg. They were bloody awful, both of them, he remembered a generation later.
We used to play little youth clubs around the Pinner area and Northwood and Ruislip. I never used to sing. We used to have a singer called Stuart Brown, who was with the group more or less until it folded. The first person I ever backed was Major Lance, and I thought that was the big life. And we used to literally get 15 quid a week for hurtling up the countryside and playing sometimes 2 or 3 gigs a night, which you tell the bands nowadays that and they'll never believe you. We started off at Douglas House in London, which is a US servicemen's club at Lancaster Gate. And then that was in the afternoon. Then we rushed up the motorways to play the legendary Ritz Plaza ballrooms in Birmingham. And then we came back after playing that double to play the Q Club in Braid Street. We got there about 5:30 in the morning, and you imagine the place, you know, at 5:30 in the morning.
It was the Cromwellian that was my favourite place of the day because I loved gambling at that time.
Long John Baldry.
Anyway, on one of my breaks from the poker table, I went downstairs to the basement disco to see this young band that was playing. And they were called Bluesology, named after one of Django Reinhardt's tunes, I think. And playing keyboards in this band was Reginald Kenneth Dwight, an 18-year-old kid. Unfortunately, he didn't have a piano at that time, not on the road with him anyway, and had to make do with one of those dreadful Vox Continental things. But anyway, they made a very respectable noise, and I said, hey, guys, I said, well, how would you like to, when I've finished this Rolling Stones nonsense, come out on the road and do some backup? And they said, yeah, sure, we'd love to, but we've got to go to Sweden first. And then they drove off the ferry and literally straight to Birmingham University, where I had a show booked. So we literally did the show without any kind of rehearsal, just winged it. And it worked out very well. So they were my band right through from 66 till 69, I think, was when I said cheerio to them, or maybe 1970.
But on the way back from yet another bluesology gig, Reg decided that it was time for a change. He'd been worried for some time that Reg Dwight made him sound more like a librarian than a musician. And so, taking the Christian name of bluesology's saxophonist Elton Dean and his new surname from the band's frontman Long John Baldry, Reg Dwight was reborn as Elton John.
It actually happened on an aeroplane ride from Edinburgh to London on May 12, 1968. And that was the day after the last night that Elton had spent with the band. And he's saying, well, I can see that I might have a future as a singer-songwriter, but I can hardly expect anyone to take me seriously if I'm calling myself Reginald Dwight or Reg Dwight or Reginald Kenneth Dwight. We said, surely, yes, we agree. Absolutely, Reg. We'll have to provide another name for you. And on that flight, the name was decided on. It was Elton from Elton Dean and the John from John Baldry. So he was born on that flight, May the 12th, 1968. So that was the birth of Elton John.
Years later, Elton would also add a middle name, Hercules, apparently as a homage to Steptoe and Son's cart horse. But as 1967 drew on, such confident gestures still seemed a long way off. Uncertain of his sexuality, worried about his weight, and increasingly unhappy with the direction his career was taking, Reg was discovering that the newly emerged Elton shared all his old problems. It was supposed to be the summer of love, not that that made much difference to Elton. Then one day an ad appeared in the New Musical Express announcing that Liberty Records were looking for artistes, composers, singers and musicians.
Always wanted to see that advertisement again. And I wrote in, and I was asked to go and see a guy called Ray Williams. And suddenly he said, oh, do you write songs? I said, not really. I said, I think I could write songs, but I couldn't write lyrics. I don't think I could do that. I'm not interested in writing lyrics. So he said, well, this little chap from Lincolnshire has just sent me some. See what you think. So I took it home and was completely knocked out. I thought, wow, because it was just the start of the psychedelic era, So I wrote a few songs to Bernie's lyrics. Bernie, by the way, was still in Lincolnshire, not on the scene yet. So I suddenly started going around to Dick James Music and doing all these demos of the songs I'd written without ever meeting Dick James or anyone like that. I used to just walk in the studio and do these demos. And suddenly Bernie appeared one day and said, oh, I'm the man who writes, sitting in the studio, and he said, I'm the man who writes the lyrics, and was extremely shy, and so was I. And we just sort of went and had a cup of coffee together in the corner in Charing Cross Road. And we said, should we write together? It was very romantic at the time. And we said yes. So that's how I really got established with him. And then he was then moved down to London. He moved into with his auntie in Putney. I know more about his history than he does, probably.
That afternoon in an office in Albemarle Street, London, the most successful British songwriting partnership since the Beatles was born. Unlike Reg's rather troubled upbringing in Pinner, Bernie Taupin had spent an idyllic childhood growing up in the flat Lincolnshire countryside. But he too was a solitary child who always seemed to have his nose stuck in a book. Inspired by those books and by the American country and folk music he heard coming out of the radio, Bernie began tentatively to write his own poems and lyrics. It was a package of these faltering first words, painfully picked out on an old typewriter at the kitchen table, that had found their way onto Ray Williams' desk in London. Before long, Bernie had moved down to London and was staying with Elton at his mum's house in Pinner, so that the pair could work full-time on their music.
You have to realise this was 1967-68.
Bernie Taupin.
And everybody was trying to get in the Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds bandwagon. And so I was writing things like marshmallow melodies in my mind, and the sky is bleeding, rainbow tears, and colour slide city and things like this, and they just went on and on and on with these awful sort of abstract words. But, I mean, when you look back on them now, they're just positively dreadful. I mean, yeah, awful. Somewhere lying in somebody's archives is a lot of demos of a lot of very, very naive young songs.
Do you believe in fairies? For the children's rhymes are in my mind, seen through the colors of my eyes. A rainbow in the sky, with the flowers of sea, picked by the beautiful people who've gone. Where have they gone? Where have they all gone? They're all throwing coins in a velvet fountain, wishing on stars and floating on air. Can somebody catch me? My cloud is a stranger, and mystery believes me, oh velvet fountain.
For the next 3.5 years, until his breakthrough with Your Song, Elton John paid his dues in the engine room of rock and roll. During the dog days of the late 60s, he was kept busy working as a session singer and pianist, playing amongst others on Tom Jones' Delilah, the Scaffels' Ginganguli, and the Hollies' He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother.
The road is long, with a many a winding tongue that leads us to who knows where, who knows where. But I'm strong. My brother, so on we go.
In a further effort to make ends meet, Elton sang on hit compilation albums for budget labels like Marble Arch and Music for Pleasure, the ones that sold for something like 1911. They asked you, can you tell the difference between these and the original sounds? Well, actually, yes, most purchasers could tell the difference. But it's still fun to hear the young Elton sounding much as he does today, covering hits like White Plains, My Baby Loves Love, My Baby Loves Lovin', Norman Greenbaum's Oh, Spirit in the Sky, Christie's Yellow River, Yellow River.
I really enjoyed doing them. They were very well made records. In fact, some of them, I think the back tracks were excellent. And David Byron, actually, he used to do most of the lead singing on these cover versions, and Dana Gillespie used to do most of the girls' ones, and I was occasionally allowed to do one or two. I did Signed, Sealed, and Delivered.
Like a fool, I went and stayed too long. Now I'm wondering if your love's still strong. Ooh, baby, here I am, signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. Oh, yeah. Then the time I went and said goodbye. Oh, now I'm back and not ashamed to cry. Ooh, baby, here I am, signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of fairy tale in it and a lot of sort of dreaming in it. But again, I have to stress that we're talking about two guys that were like 17 and 19, you know? And our nights were full of optimism. You know, we would make these we would record in Dick James' studio in Oxford Street, and Steve Brown and Elton and I would sort of wander through the streets at night looking in. Those days are very vivid. Those days are far more vivid to me than, say, the mid-'70s when we had tremendous success. And I look back at those days with great nostalgia. I mean, Elton and I sleeping on the floor of Steve Brown's father's Salvation Army place off of Oxford Street, you know. And we used to go to bed sort of going, do you think it's going to be, you know, good tomorrow? And
although Elton and Bernie were determined to persevere with writing their own original material, drawing heavily from influences like Bob Dylan, the band, the Beatles, their music publisher, Dick James, was busy trying to push the partnership in what he saw as a more commercial direction. As a result of his endeavours, acts like Plastic Penny, Aisha, and actor Edward Woodward were among the first to record songs written by Elton John and Bernie Taupin. And another of their collaborations, I Can't Go On Living Without You, was sung by Lulu, was even shortlisted for the 1969 Eurovision Song Contest.
We didn't actually write the song for the Eurovision. We'd already had a song. Dick picked it out, or somebody picked it out at the office, I can't remember, and put it forward to the panel, the Eurovision panel. And I remember Michael Aspel saying something like, oh, this is Can't Go On Living Without You, written by Elton Jones and Bernie Taupin, or something like that. And there was some pan on us. And we were both sort of looking around going, huh? Lulu sang it.
When I did the Eurovision Song Contest in '68 or '69, something like that, he wrote a song with Bernie that because there were 13 songs, and I would do one each week. And he and Bernie wrote a song called I Can't Go On Living Without You, oh no, my love. And then it went da 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 da. I can't go on living without you, oh no. That was one of the songs I hoped would win, but of course it didn't. It was boom, bang, a bang.
Here's Cilla Black's version of that very same song.
Oh my goodness. You see, we both had the same idea that it was a hit song.
I can't go on living without you, oh no. I once said I could go on without your love. I would be strong, but things have changed and heaven's above. I know that I need you more than I did before. I can't go on living without you, oh no, my love. I can't go on living without you, oh no, my love. I can't go on living without
supplement his weekly wages of £15 from Dick James Music, poor Bernie was on an even more meagre £10 a week. Elton would also hire himself out as a singer to demo other writers' material. One of the most legendary occasions was a 2-day session he undertook in 1970, singing the songs of writers from the Warlock music stable, with such eminent singer-songwriters as Richard Thompson, Nick Drake and John Martin. Years later, when Elton sold off his entire record collection to benefit AIDS charities, it was said that he only kept back 2 for himself: a copy of the Beatles' White Album personally signed by John, George, Paul and Ringo, and his pressing of the 1970 Warlock music demo disc. Busy as he was, Elton was still desperate to have a hit record of his own. And eventually it came. After 6 years as a professional musician and a dozen stabs at success, in January 1971, Elton John made his chart debut with Your Song.
I wrote the song after having bacon and eggs in his mother's flat in Pinner while he was having a bath in the other room. It was definitely not written for anybody in particular. So there.
It's a little bit funny, this feeling inside, when I'm not one of those who can easily hide. I don't have much money, but boy, if I did, I'd buy a big house where we both could live. If I was a sculptor, but then again, no, or a man who makes potions in a traveling shows. I know it's not much, but it's the best I can do. My gift is my song, and this one's for you. And you can tell everybody this is your song. It may be quite simple, but now that it's done, I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I put down in words how wonderful life is while you're in the world. I sat on the roof and kicked off the moss. Well, a few of the verses, it got me quite cross, but the sun's been quite kind while I wrote this song. It's for people like you that keep it turned on. So excuse me for getting, but these things I do, you see, I've forgotten if they're green or they're blue. Anyway, the thing is, what I really mean, yours are the sweetest eyes I've ever seen. So you can tell everybody this is your song. It may be quite simple, but now that it's done, I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I put down in words how wonderful life is while you're in the world. I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I put down in words how wonderful life is while you're in the world.
For the next 30 years, the hits would just keep on coming. But for Elton John, that was where it all began. Back in the days of only 3 television channels, when Edward Heath was Prime Minister, Richard Nixon was President, And Watergate, well, that was just the name of a Washington apartment building.
Freezes just like ice, and there's a cold and lonely light that shines from you. You wind up like the wreck you hide behind that mask you use. And did you think this fool could never win? Well, look at me, I'm coming back again. I got a taste of love in a simple way. And if you need to know while I'm still standing, you just fade away. Don't you know I'm still standing better than I ever did, looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid. And I'm still standing after all this time, picking up the pieces of my life without you on my mind. I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Once I never could have hoped to win. You're starting down the road and leaving me again. The threats you made were meant to cut me down. And if my love was just a circus, you'd be a clown by now. No, I'm still standing better than I ever did, looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid. And I'm still standing after all this time, picking up the pieces of my life without you on my mind. I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't you know that I'm still standing better than I ever did, looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid. And I'm still standing after all this time, picking up the pieces of my life without you on my mind. I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 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 I'm still standing.
If you want a radio station that broadcasts timeless concerts,
And now Kiki D introduces the second part of the Elton John story.
BBC Radio 2. When are you gonna come down? When are you going to land? I should have stayed on the phone. I should have listened to my own mind. You know you can't hold me forever. I didn't sign up with you. I'm not a present for your friends to open. This boy's too young to be singing the blues. So goodbye, yellow brick road, where the dogs of society howl. You can't plant me in your penthouse. I'm going back to my plow, back to the howling old island woods, hunting a hornet-backed toad. Oh, I found the side of my future lies beyond the yellow brick road.
The 1970s were the glory years for Elton John. In early 1971, when Your Song gave him his first hit, he found himself hailed after 6 relentless years of auditioning, writing, recording and performing as an overnight sensation. The previous year, his debut album, Empty Sky, had gone largely unnoticed, but Your Song and Elton John, the album which followed, had demonstrated that there was an audience for Elton's beguiling melodies and Bernie Taupin's intriguing lyrics.
Rocket Man seemed to me like an obvious single.
Bernie Taupin.
The first line just came to me. I was just thinking, and all of a sudden I just thought, she packed my bags last night, pre-flight, 0 hour, 9 a.m., etc., etc. And, you know, I got those first couple of lines, and then I went back and wrote them down, and then the next day I just sat down and finished it off.
Elton had worked hard for this, and having finally established a foothold on the charts, was not about to let go.
She packed my bags last night, pre-flight, 0 hour, 9 a.m. And I'm gonna be high as a kite by then. I miss the earth so much, I miss my wife. It's lonely out in space on such a timeless flight. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh no, 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 I'm a rocket man, burning out his fuse out here at home.
It's the one time that I really remember sort of actually writing a song. I was staying at my parents' house up in Lincolnshire, and I was coming back one night from Lincoln. You know, it was about 12 o'clock at night, just driving home. It was very dark, it was a very sort of moonlit night, and I just remember seeing sort of like a shooting star or something, or maybe it was an aeroplane, I can't remember. And I just started thinking about astronauts in general for some reason, and how times had changed so much, where, you know, the days of when somebody said to you, doing this is like landing on the moon or something, you know. It had become and was becoming sort of like an everyday occupation.
With his regular band of guitarist Caleb Quay, bassist Dee Murray and drummer Nigel Olsson, Elton gigged steadily throughout 1970, opening British shows for Santana, Sandy Denny's Fotheringay and T-Rex. That same year, as well as releasing the Elton John album containing Your Song, Elton recorded and released Tumbleweed Connection, the album that really consolidated his reputation as a coming man of British rock. 1970 also saw Elton making his American debut, playing the prestigious Los Angeles Troubadour as support for singer-songwriter David Ackles. Within weeks, stars like Bob Dylan and Paul Simon were coming along to listen, and the new British sensation was being hailed as the first superstar of the 70s.
If you feel that it's real, I'm on trial, and I'm here again in your presence, like a coin in your man. I am dented, and I'm spanned without treason. Through a cast iron zone is the one danger zone. Take me to the pilot for control. Take me to the pilot of your soul. Take me to the pilot, lead me to the train. Take me to the pilot, I'm gonna train you. Take me to the pilot, lead me to the train. Take me to the pilot, I'm gonna train you. Na na na, na na na, na na na, na 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 na, na na na, na na na, na na na, na na na.
Despite the accolades, Elton was still a very shy person, but he began to realise that the retiring Reg Dwight could remain hidden away behind the enormous glasses and outrageous stage persona of Elton John. It was as a performer Elton was attracting all the accolades. In concert, he hammered his piano in a style unseen since Jerry Lee Lewis tore up a storm in the rock and roll 50s.
First time I met Elton was in New York in 1970 when he was playing one of his very, very first gigs at the Fillmore East.
Sir Tim Rice.
I remember him doing Border Song and Your Song and one or two other tracks from that and the Empty Sky albums. But I can't remember any particular huge quantity of stage histrionics or anything. I mean, he was obviously a very lively, dynamic young pianist and great singer. I don't think he was wearing anything outrageous, and I don't think he was doing colossal Jerry Lee Lewis antics. I mean, he was obviously standing up at times and leaping around and very energetic, but I don't remember thinking anything other than this is a very talented writer and artist. I didn't think, my God, what an incredible stage act. I mean, he was very good, but it was the music that hit home first, which I think is the right way round. And he established himself not through an incredibly wacky stage persona. He established himself through a string of extraordinarily good songs.
Both Elton and Bernie remember those early years as the best of times, when they were both young and full of enthusiasm. Buoyed up by being able to record their own music and optimistic for the future. Elton was the obvious focus of attention on stage, but Bernie's lyrics were also attracting attention, and to his delight, had even been compared to those of his idols Bob Dylan and Robbie Robertson of the band. Elton had been slogging around with bluesology since leaving school, and since 1967 he had struggled for success with Bernie. Now, at last, their work was being hailed on both sides of the Atlantic. And by the end of 1971, the music press was even suggesting that Elton John might just be the man to fill the vacuum left by the Beatles.
Soon the pines will be falling everywhere. Village children fight each other for a share. And the 609 goes roaring past the creek. Deacon Lee prepares a sermon for next week. I saw Grandma yesterday down at the store. Well, she's really going fine for 84. Well, she asked me if sometime I'd fix her barn for old girl. She needs a hand to run the farm. And it's good old country comfort in my bones. Just the sweetest sound my ears have ever known. Just an old-fashioned feeling fully grown. Country comforts in a truck that's going home.
After the success of Your Song in early 1971, Elton had set about building on his breakthrough. The swift succession of hits which followed over the next few years ensured that Elton would remain a fixture in the charts for much of the decade. Rocket Man, Daniel, Candle in the Wind, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, Saturday Nights Are Right for Fighting, Benny and the Jets, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, The Bitch Is Back, Philadelphia Freedom, Someone Saved My Life Tonight, Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word, and Crocodile Rock.
Crocodile Rock was ultra-commercial pop record, which it was intended to be a tongue-in-cheek takeoff of the American 50s thing, and it wasn't intended to me as a single anyway. It was just regarded as a joke. It's all a number you play for about 50 times and it drives you stark raving mad.
I remember when rock was young. Me and Susie had so much fun, holding hands and skimming stones. Had an old gold Chevy and a place of my own, but the biggest kick I ever got was doing a thing called the Crocodile Rock.
America took to Elton from the start, and in early 1973, Crocodile Rock gave him his first US #1. Back in the UK, try as he might, Elton could never quite reach that elusive #1 spot in the British single charts. However, in 1976, Don't Go Breaking My Heart, a duet with his old friend, me, reached the coveted top slot.
I thought of the title, Don't Go Breaking My Heart, phoned Bernie in Barbados and said, listen, sang the song down the phone, the melody. I thought it would be good for a duet because I'd always wanted to do a duet with her, but I hadn't been able to because I've been on different record companies throughout the world. So this was the first album that I've ever been on, Blue Moves that is, that I was on my own record company and she was on my own record company. So I thought, oh great, let's do a duet. And so it just worked out. Again, it's really a fluke.
We laid down the track, and it may seem strange to anybody listening to the record now, but really the enthusiasm wasn't incredibly high for laying the track down at the time. It was like, oh God, all right, roll the tape, we'll do it, you know.
Gus Dudgeon.
And yet it came out sounding pretty good. Then when we started to do the vocal overdubs, I came in one morning, Elton was already at the studio, and he had a big grin on his face. And he said, I've got a great idea. So I said, what? He said, well, you know, Don't Go Breaking My Heart. So I said, yeah. He said, how about doing as a duet with me and Kiki? And I thought about it, and I thought, that's a really great idea. And he said, look, run the tape, and I'll sing you the bit I've worked out that I could sing, and then the bit that she could sing. So he ran the tape, and he sang at least 90% of it. And I said, hey, wait a minute. If this is supposed to be a duet, you're supposed to do 50% maximum. So he kind of pulled a bit of a face, and I said, come on, let's have a look at the lyrics. So he went through the lyrics, and we scrubbed a few more lines out, and we changed a few yous to me's and a few him to her or whatever, I don't know. And we sorted it out. And then he laid down his part, and then he sang her part on a separate track. So he laid his part down as a master. Then we came back to England. We played her part, with Elton singing her part. And to distinguish between the two, I had his voice on the left of the stereo and hers on the right. And she literally learnt it in the studio and then did her part.
I have to tell you a wonderful story. Don't Go Breaking My Heart was #8 in the American charts. It was sailing up the British top 10. And I called my mum in Yorkshire and I said, Mum, I know you've never flown, and I know you don't particularly like the idea, but will you come to New York first class on the plane, stay at the Waldorf Astoria for 1 week, come and see me perform every night at Madison Square Garden with Elton John, and sail back on the QE2? And she said, oh, love, we'd love to, but we've just booked our caravan holiday. Bless her. Anyway, she did come along in the end, and we had a fantastic time together. The 70s were undeniably Elton's decade, and as with Lennon and McCartney, it was not just the quality of the material Elton and Bernie Taupin produced that was astonishing, but also the sheer quantity. Even by the prolific standards of the day, Elton's contract with Dick James was unusually exacting, demanding that he deliver 3 complete albums of original material each and every year. And as well as an unrepeatable and unbeatable run of hit singles, the albums just kept on coming. Tumbleweed Connection, Madman Across the Water, Honky Chateau, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Elton rarely put a musical foot wrong, and many familiar songs from this period, including Tiny Dancer and Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, were never even released as singles. For many of Elton's fans, 1973's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was among their best-loved Elton albums.
It was originally going to be recorded in Jamaica, and I had my bee in the bonnet about doing it in Jamaica in the sunshine, and we all went over there with all the equipment, which cost a lot of money. We went to the studios, and I wrote all the songs literally in 3 days. I was in great form. And then we went into the studios to try and record it, and it was hopeless. You know, we couldn't get a good sound or anything, so we had to abandon things and go back to the chateau, and we went back there and did it more or less straight off. It was, you know, because we'd rehearsed all the numbers in Jamaica anyway, so we all knew them, and it was a really nice album to make. We did 21 tracks, and 17 ended up on the double album. In fact, it was probably the most commercial album I've ever done.
Among the 17 tracks on the double album was the original Candle in the Wind, Bernie's poignant tribute to Marilyn Monroe.
I'd been a Marilyn fan for a long time, and ever since I think Madman Across the Water, I'd always wanted to write a song about her, and I'd never found the right sort of way of doing it, you know, without being incredibly tacky. Well, Candle in the Wind is a phrase that's been used a few times. You know, okay, I'd admit that, you know, that's a pinch, but it was just a nice phrase to use. Nobody used it in a song. So I built it around that, you know, and I just tried to make it a song that told you that the reason that she was so popular is that she was to the people very much somebody that they could fall in love with without her being out of reach. And I really don't think that the majority of people thought of her as a sex symbol. They thought of her as a sex symbol, but not so much in a sort of, you know, woo John way, you know, woo, she's all right, you know, woo. It was much more than that. It was much more of a sort of, you know, put your arm around and give her a cuddle, you know, make her feel good.
Goodbye, Norma Jean. No, I never knew you at all. You had the grace to hold yourself while those around you crawled. They crawled out of the woodwork, and they whispered into your brain. They set you on the treadmill, and they made you change your name. And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never knowing who to cling to when the rain set in. And I would have liked to know you, but I was just a kid. Your candle burned out long before your legend ever did.
When Elton arrived on the scene in the wake of the progressive rock movement, his colourful costumes and exuberant performances were at odds with the aspirations of the prog rock brigade. Now, as his fame increased, Elton began to revel in the attention. Live on stage, the shy, plump Reg Dwight was banished, and Elton John was a sensation, pushing the boundaries of rock and roll performance to the limit. Before too long, Elton found himself being likened to a rock and roll Liberace.
I got to a point where I thought I'm writing too many songs that are American songs that deal with the American way of life. And I thought, well, I've got to get back to my own roots. I wanted to write something about the attitudes and the area and the sort of lifestyle I grew up with, you know.
Don't give us now.
The stellar quality of the material Elton was writing with Bernie was the obvious key to his success. But his continuing preeminence also had much to do with the musical climate of the early 70s. The Beatles had broken up very publicly. The Stones were in tax exile, and Dylan was in mysterious seclusion. The singer-songwriters that I find inspiring in my current acoustic career, such as James Taylor, Carole King, Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, were all very much in vogue. But these were very sensitive, introspective figures, one thing you could never accuse Elton John of being.
Elton was basically, when he was having his hits in the 70s, he was hitting a pop market and a rock market, and quite an intelligent market, you know, the sort of so-called intellectual rock market, all at once.
Sir Tim Rice.
But he was doing it as much with albums as with singles. When the Beatles were at their peak, the singles were still king, really, and even the Rolling Stones, and certainly Elvis. When your albums, Beatles helped change this, but however big the Beatles albums were, it was almost even towards the end of their great career, it was what's the next Beatles single was almost a bigger event. Elton, I think, by 74 or 5, particularly Yellow Brick Road and, you know, Captain Fantastic that time, the albums were bought like singles. And all the important artists that had sold lots of albums before, like Bob Dylan, they weren't considered the #1 popular artist of the time. They were slightly in their own groove, and Elton just crossed all boundaries, and maybe he was the first popular artist ready to do that.
Hey kids, shake and loose together, spotlights hitting something that's known to change the weather. But a California cough tonight, so stick around. You're gonna hear electric music, solid balls of sound. Say, can you know we haven't seen them yet? Ooh, but the soul fades down. Benny and the Jets. Oh, the wind and the wonderful. Oh man, she's a red cane. She's got electric boots, a mohair suit. You know I'm redder than a magazine. Oh, Benny and the Jets.
It's a futuristic rock and roll song. Benny was meant to be a woman to start with, and Benny was meant to be sort of like a female David Bowie. Very, very sort of, very butch but very beautiful rock and roll star with a rock and roll band. And it was meant to be very sort of 21st century. She is meant to be the ace thing, very sort of slick back hair and a very electronic band that all practically looked the same. I mean, it was just meant to conjure up the future of rock and roll.
I wanted Candle in the Wind in America. This is the time we were making Caribou. And I remember I was going through a panic-stricken time anyway, trying to make Caribou. And there was this big debate in the States whether to release Candle in the Wind or Benny. And I didn't want Benny because I just could not see it as a single whatsoever. For me, I mean, I couldn't see Bohemian Rhapsody as a single. I said to John Reed, you must be crazy recently. I mean, you've got no ideas of the singles chance at all. It shows you where I'm at. So I fought tooth and nail, and it was a guy called Pat Pipolo, who was promotion head of MCA, who phoned me up and said, listen, there's a radio station in Detroit that's insisting you put this record out, because they said it could be a #1 across the board. That is to say, it could break R&B to the black audience. And as soon as he said that, my ego got the better of me, and I thought, oh, God, I would love to have an R&B record. And so I said, look, be it on your head. If the record really doesn't do very well, I should be really annoyed.
By now, Elton was a regular fixture on Radio 1's airwaves. Despite an initially unenthusiastic response from the BBC audition panel, which in 1968 described the young singer as having a thin, piercing voice with no emotional appeal, dreary songs and pretentious material. Elton forgave them, though, and one of his best-received sessions came in 1973, at the height of his fame, when, as a guest on the Christmas Day edition of The John Peel Show, he ran through a set cosily reminiscent of young Reg Dwight's performances at the Northwood Hills Hotel in Pinner.
Dad, you this rap
gambling it out on a blade. I can see the red tail light heading for Spain. Oh, I can see that you're waving goodbye. Oh, it looks like that you must be the clouds in my eyes. They say Spain is pretty, though I've never been. Conjure yourselves, it's the best place he's ever seen. Oh, he should know, 'cause he's been there now. Oh, I love that girl, 'cause he's a billboard star.
Now he was also splashing out on houses, clothes, designer specs, more than 200 pairs in just one impulse purchase, and works of art. But eventually his acquisitive nature got the better of him. It was like some rock and roll Xanadu. Many new purchases remained in their packing cases in the outbuildings, and when there was no wall space left inside, a newly acquired Rembrandt etching had to be hung on the garage wall.
It's a little bit funny, this feeling inside. I'm not one of those who can easily hide. I don't have much money, but oh, if I did, I'd buy a big house for a couple of quid.
In June 1975, supported by the Eagles and his longtime idols, the Beach Boys, Elton headlined a massive concert at the Wembley Stadium. That same year, across the Atlantic, he became the first act since the Beatles to score 3 #1 American singles in one year. And with advance orders of 1.5 million, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy became the first album ever to go straight into the US charts at #1. Sir Cliff Richard.
I always think it's, with hindsight, you can say that Elton was going to be at first at something, and that certainly was it. I mean, to have that huge album hit #1 straight off was phenomenal, really. And of course, Elvis hadn't done that sort of thing, neither had any of the other rockers, because I suppose partly because albums weren't the thing. It was a singles market in those days.
Elton was busy pounding the American live circuit too, and when he performed 2 shows at the enormous Dodger Stadium in front of 100,000 fans, the mayor of Los Angeles officially designated it Elton John Day. Space was even found for a star on the legendary Hollywood Boulevard in honor of the boy from Pinner.
Of the singer-songwriters that emerged around the time, the beginning of the 70s, he was certainly the most extravagant, the most outgoing, the most extrovert. You see, of course, back in 1970, when I first saw him, it was by no means clear that he was going to hang around. In fact, I can recall at one point MCA being quite worried that through a sort of strange combination of circumstances, it was felt he had too much product out. He had about 3 or 4 albums almost out at once on the charts within about a year of breaking through in America, partly because he'd done a deal to work on a film soundtrack of a film called Friends, and then that came out on a different label, which didn't fit in with MCA's plans. Then he did a live album as well, and he had a couple of studio albums, and his first album that hadn't been a hit first time round began selling again. So suddenly he had about 4 albums on the charts at once. But I remember MCA saying, well, of course, you know, it may just be that we're going to have 2 great years of this guy, and then there's so much product, no one will want to hear any more. Well, how wrong can you be?
Life seemed sweet. He was at the top of his game, and his whole family, including his 75-year-old Nan, Ivy, had flown over to the States to help to celebrate his success. And that was the moment that Elton chose to swallow 60 tablets of Valium and leap into a swimming pool. As he was pulled out, he heard his beloved Nan saying sadly, "I suppose we've all got to go home now."
Someone saved my life tonight. 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 So save your strength and run the field you play alone. Someone saved my life tonight. Sugar bear, you almost had your hooks in me, didn't you, dear? You nearly had me roped and tied. All about hypnotized, sweet freedom whispered in my ear, "You're a butterfly, and butterflies are free to fly, fly away, high away, bye-bye."
Elton's out in the studio and he's giving all his effort into a song that's incredibly personal, and it's about the guy thinking of committing suicide.
Gus Dudgeon.
I'm saying, "Okay, hold it. Now, listen, man, you're singing flat." He's going, "Oh, God, all right, run it again." So he runs it again. Like, "No, hold it," I'm going, "Look, now really, man, you're so out of tune on that." "Oh, God," he's going, "this is ridiculous. I can't take all this." And I realized that we spent quite a lot of time on that vocal. And when it was all over, and we did the playback, and Davey was sitting there and he said, "Poor man," he said, "that vocal is great." And I said, "Yeah, but we worked on it an awful long time to get it just right." And he said, "Well, how could you do that to Elton?" So I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, I mean, have you read the lyrics?" So I said, "No, why?" He said, "Well, look at the lyrics." So I took a look, right? And I'm suddenly realizing that I've made him sing the most unbelievably personal things over and over again just to get a bloody note right or a bit of phrasing together. I made him live his life about 300 times over in 2 minutes.
So what was the story behind Someone Saved My Life Tonight?
Well, Someone Saved My Life Tonight is a song that Elton claims that he wrote in honor of me. I'm not quite sure that, where I fit into Honey Bears or any of that kind of stuff. But
Long John Baldry.
It stems from a night out that we had, which may have started in La Chasse, which was the drinking club above the Marquee. Bernie Taupin, Reg and I started out the evening in this club drinking, but we ended up in the Bag of Nails, and he was obviously in a very despondent mood. And I said, "Well, what's the matter with you?" And he said, "Oh, this woman, she's trapped me into marriage, and I don't really want to marry her." And I said, "Well, then you don't have to, for Christ's sake." This woman originally was going out with a dwarf disc jockey called the Mighty Atom. And Reg steamed in and picked her up, and she was taller than anyone, almost as tall as me, this woman. Quite glamorous, quite good looking, but not for him. I said, "Go home, pack your bags, go home to your mother," which he did.
Those close to Elton on a day-to-day level could see he was tormented and confused, and that even the unprecedented success he was enjoying on both sides of the Atlantic didn't seem to be helping. But the following year, in the American magazine Rolling Stone, his unhappiness was laid out for all of us to see, under the headline, "Elton's Frank Talk, The Lonely Life of a Superstar." In the interview, he also confessed that he was bisexual. This was the first time Elton had spoken openly about his sexuality, although he revealed later that his first gay relationship had been with his manager, John Reid, the man who for many years, even after their personal relationship had ended, steered Elton's career to unparalleled heights. Once the Elton John bandwagon got rolling during the 70s, there was no stopping it. As a performer, Elton became synonymous with all the excesses of that decade, from the elaborate costumes to his over-enthusiastic approach to the rock and roll lifestyle. But even without the enormous trademark hats and platform boots, Elton towered over the American music scene during the 1970s, easily eclipsing the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, David Bowie, and Bob Dylan in the decade's album charts.
I used to be a rolling stone, you know. If a cause was right, I'd leave to find the answer on the road. I used to be a heart beating for someone, but the times have changed. The less I say, the more my work gets done. 'Cause I live and breathe in Philadelphia freedom. From the day that I was born, I waved the flag. Philadelphia freedom took me knee-high to a man. Yeah, give me a piece of mind my daddy never had. For Philadelphia freedom, shine on me. I love you, shine a light through the eyes of the one left behind. Shine a light, shine a light, shine a light, won't you shine a light? Philadelphia freedom, I love. Yes, I do.
The Americans lapped up Elton's flamboyant stage persona too. Fans knew that when they went to see an Elton John show, they were going to get their money's worth. Not just all the hits they knew and loved, but spectacular showmanship as well. Elton would often appear on stage dressed as Ronald McDonald, Ali Baba or Mozart.
Chickens, Donald Duck, amongst other things.
Ray Cooper.
Normally they were often surprises for all of us. But my heart always went out to him as someone that was the consummate showman, always ready to put himself right on the spot, you know, because the audience could turn one way or the other with all that stuff. But it was always done with an instinctive embrace of them, so it was always very warm back to him. You know, I think one just laughed with joy, not with anything of embarrassment in the extraordinary behaviour.
I've got this image of being dressing up from the beginning, but if people look at my early photographs, I only wore jeans and braces and wing shoes. That was it, and that was all I wore. And so I didn't really see that as being very flash. But the flamboyant clothes, I mean, I got outrageous. I mean, it was just getting out of hand. I mean, wearing hats on stage that actually sort of weighed half a hundredweight, and I'd struggle through Funeral for a Friend and Love Lies Bleeding, and then have to be taken to the side of the stage and have this hat lifted from my head. So, I mean, it was getting to ridiculous proportions, but I sort of enjoyed it. And I look back now and I see the pictures and I think, my God, how could you? But I don't regret it in any way.
But underlying all the showbiz razzmatazz was a solid success that greeted every record he released, particularly in America, where he became the decade's most durable superstar.
It was in America. We'd done, I think we'd finished rehearsals, probably in Los Angeles, and it was time to depart. And I'd heard about the Starship, it was quite a piece of legend in the rock and roll world. And we got into the cars and arrived at the airport where there it was, the Starship. It was extraordinary. I think it was a 707, fully stretched with a fireplace in it and bedrooms, and of course there are various stories of surprises even for him. I remember one night after a concert getting back on the plane, and there was what sounded like a wonderful lounge organ, because there was an organ on the plane with a bar fully, and it was Stevie Wonder playing. It was extraordinary. I mean, touring with him in the 70s was an extraordinary experience, meeting everybody. Elizabeth Taylor, everybody used to come to the concerts, Cary Grant. There was one point where we had more, it caused some uproar in some state where we had more outriders and police activity than the president got.
Throughout his career, Elton John has always been a music fan. Even after he began recording professionally in 1970, he would sometimes be found working behind the counter at Soho's Musicland shop, so he could get copies of the latest American import albums as soon as they came out. Now that same enthusiasm for other people's music led him to launch Rocket Records, whose biggest hit came from a very grateful early signing. Yes, Amoureuse, it literally changed my life. I mean, I'd been recording and singing for 9 years. I'd had an album out on Tamla Motown and an album out on Fontana Records. But it wasn't till I worked with Elton in '73 that we did this song, Amoureuse.
Strands of light upon a bedroom floor, change the night through an open door. I'm awake, but this is not my home. For the first time, I'm not alone. Should have told him I'd do anything if I could hold him for just another day. For just another day. His love is something I will not forget. When I am far away, when I am far away, I feel the rain fall on another planet, another planet.
Aside from music, the one constant in Elton's life has been his association with his beloved Watford Football Club. In 1974, Elton became a director of the club, and 2 years later he was elected chairman. He had the pleasure of watching from the director's box as the club made a steady progress from bottom of the 4th division until finally in 1982 they reached the 1st division. And 2 years later, Elton had the ultimate thrill of watching Watford compete in the FA Cup final against Everton, although sadly they lost 2-0. Appearing on Desert Island Discs a few years later, Elton picked Abide With Me as one of his pieces of music, specifically to remind him of Watford's great moment. He told Michael Parkinson that apart from getting married, that was the happiest day of my life. In 1997, Elton chose the song again, this time to perform as his contribution to a charity record. This song always gives me goosebumps, he explained.
Abide with me, fast forth the eventide, the darkness deepens, Lord, abide with me. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me.
As the 70s drew to a close, however, all was not well within the Elton camp. His record sales were decreasing, and after the relative failure of 1976's Blue Moves album, even the writing partnership with Bernie Taupin had come to an end. During the 7 years apart from Bernie, Elton's musical partner was lyricist Gary Osborne, who had written the English lyric to my first hit, Amoureuse, and went on to collaborate with Elton on Little Genie, The Fantastic Blue Eyes, and many other great songs. Elton's worldwide audience was still expanding, though, and in 1979 he became one of the first rock stars to play in Russia. But his health was suffering. On at least 2 occasions he was rushed to hospital with suspected heart attacks, although they eventually turned out to be stress-related false alarms. Elton had always boasted that he had the constitution of an ox, but now the strain of overindulgence, confusion over his sexual orientation, and year after year of touring were finally beginning to tell.
What am I gonna do to make you love me? What have I gotta do to make you care? What do I do when lightning strikes me
and awake to find that you're not there. What do I do to make you want me? What have I gotta do to be heard? What do I say when it's all over? I'm sorry seems to be the hardest word. It's sad, so sad. It's a sad, sad situation, and it's getting more and more absurd. It's sad, so sad. Why can't we talk it over? Oh, it seems to me that sorry seems to be the hardest word.
His personal life had been profoundly unhappy for some time, but now his music too was suffering, and his audience had begun to dwindle. Between 1978 and 1983, Elton did not enjoy a single top 10 album in the UK, and in America, it was to be another 16 years after Don't Go Breaking My Heart before he had his next #1 single, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me.
I always close my eyes during that one to sing it because you need to concentrate on singing that one. And there are times when, you know, in America there's a habit of lighting matches when the audience approves, and you'd sort of be halfway through it and then it's sort of very quiet, and then there's all these lighted matches around. And they did it at Madison Square Garden just after John Lennon had been on stage, and I was very emotional anyway because John Lennon, that whole thing at Madison Square Garden was tremendous. And a little tear did run down my eyes. It's impossible not to get touched by that sort of thing because it's just incredible to look up and see everybody sort of holding up a match. You know? And it's sort of like a skater sort of going around holding up 9.8.
I can't light no more of the darkness. All my pictures seem to fade to black and white. I'm growing tired, and time stands still before me. Frozen heat on the light of my life. It's too late to save myself from falling. I took a chance and changed your life. But you misread my meaning when I met you. Close the door and left me blinded by the light. Don't let the sun go down on me. Although I said to myself, there's always someone else I see. Just a loud fragment of your life to wander free. And losing everything is like the sun going down on me.
And Elton John performing Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me from his forthcoming album One Night Only ends part 2 of the Elton John story. The programme was introduced by Kiki D, written by Patrick Humphreys, and the producer was Graham Pass. And now Kiki D introduces the second part of the Elton John story.
When are you gonna come down? When are you going to land? I should have stayed on the phone. I should have listened to my own mind. You know you can't hold me forever. I didn't sign up with you. I'm not a present for your friends to open. This boy's too young to be singing the blues. So goodbye, yellow brick road, where the dogs of society howl. You can't plant me in your penthouse. I'm going back to my plow, back to the howling old island woods, hunting a hornet-back toad. Oh, I found the side of my future lies beyond the yellow brick road.
The 1970s were the glory years for Elton John. In early 1971, when Your Song gave him his first hit, he found himself hailed after 6 relentless years of auditioning, writing, recording and performing as an overnight sensation. The previous year, his debut album, Empty Sky, had gone largely unnoticed, but Your Song and Elton John, the album which followed, had demonstrated that there was an audience for Elton's beguiling melodies and Bernie Taupin's intriguing lyrics.
Rocket Man seemed to me like an obvious single.
Bernie Taupin.
The first line just came to me. I was just thinking, and all of a sudden I just thought, she packed my bags last night, pre-flight, 0 hour, 9 a.m., etc., etc. And, you know, I got those first couple of lines, and then I went back and wrote them down, and then the next day I just sat down and finished it off.
Elton had worked hard for this, and having finally established a foothold on the charts, was not about to let go.
She packed my bags last night, pre-flight, 0 hour, 9 a.m. And I'm gonna be high as a kite by then. I miss the earth so much, I miss my wife. It's lonely out in space on such a timeless flight. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh no, 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 I'm a rocket man, burning out his fuse out there alone.
It's the one time that I really remember sort of actually writing a song. I was staying at my parents' house up in Lincolnshire, and I was coming back one night from Lincoln. You know, it was about 12 o'clock at night, just driving home. It was very dark. It was a very sort of moonlit night, and I just remember seeing sort of like a shooting star or something, or maybe it was an aeroplane. I can't remember. And I just started thinking about astronauts in general for some reason, and how times had changed so much, where You know, the days of when somebody said to you, doing this is like landing on the moon or something, you know. It had was becoming sort of like an everyday occupation.
With his regular band of guitarist Caleb Quay, bassist Dee Murray, and drummer Nigel Olsson, Elton gigged steadily throughout 1970, opening British shows for Santana, Sandy Denny's Fotheringay, and T-Rex. That same year, as well as releasing the Elton John album containing Your Song, Elton recorded and released Tumbleweed Connection, the album that really consolidated his reputation as a coming man of British rock. 1970 also saw Elton making his American debut, playing the prestigious Los Angeles Troubadour as support for singer-songwriter David Ackles. Within weeks, stars like Bob Dylan and Paul Simon were coming along to listen, and the new British sensation was being hailed as the first superstar of the 70s.
If you feel that it's real, I'm on trial, and I'm a hurricane in your present. Like a coin in your man, I am dented, and I'm spent without treason. Through a glass iron zone is the one danger zone. Take me to the pilot for control. Take me to the pilot of your show. Take me to the pilot, lead me to the train. Take me to the pilot, I'm a trainer. Take me to the pilot, lead me to the train. Take me to the pilot, I'm a trainer. Na na na, na na na, na na na, na 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 na, na na na, na na na, na na na, na na na.
Despite the accolades, Elton was still a very shy person, but he began to realise that the retiring Reg Dwight could remain hidden away behind the enormous glasses and outrageous stage persona of Elton John. It was as a performer Elton was attracting all the accolades. In concert, he hammered his piano in a style unseen since Jerry Lee Lewis tore up a storm in the rock and roll 50s.
First time I met Elton was in New York in 1970 when he was playing one of his very, very first gigs at the Fillmore East.
Sir Tim Rice.
I remember him doing Border Song and Your Song and one or two other tracks from that and the Empty Sky albums. But I can't remember any particular huge quantity of stage histrionics or anything. I mean, he was obviously a very lively, dynamic young pianist and great singer. I don't think he was wearing anything outrageous, and I don't think he was doing colossal Jerry Lee Lewis antics. I mean, he was obviously standing up at times and leaping around and very energetic, but I don't remember thinking anything other than this is a very talented writer and artist. I didn't think, my God, what an incredible stage act. I mean, he was very good, but it was the music that hit home first, which I think is the right way round. And he established himself not through an incredibly wacky stage persona. He established himself through a string of extraordinarily good songs.
Both Elton and Bernie remember those early years as the best of times, when they were both young and full of enthusiasm. Buoyed up by being able to record their own music, and optimistic for the future. Elton was the obvious focus of attention on stage, but Bernie's lyrics were also attracting attention, and to his delight, had even been compared to those of his idols Bob Dylan and Robbie Robertson of the band. Elton had been slogging around with bluesology since leaving school, and since 1967 he had struggled for success with Bernie. Now, at last, their work was being hailed on both sides of the Atlantic. And by the end of 1971, the music press was even suggesting that Elton John might just be the man to fill the vacuum left by the Beatles.
Soon the pines will be falling everywhere. Village children fight each other for a share. And the 609 goes roaring past the creek. Deacon Lee prepares a sermon for next week. I saw Grandma yesterday down at the store. Well, she's really going fine for 84. Well, she asked me if sometime I'd fix her barn. Poor old girl, she needs a hand to run the farm. And it's good old country comfort in my bones. Just the sweetest sound my ears have ever known. Just an old-fashioned feeling, fully grown. Country comforts in a truck that's going home.
After the success of Your Song in early 1971, Elton had set about building on his breakthrough. The swift succession of hits which followed over the next few years ensured that Elton would remain a fixture in the charts for much of the decade. Rocket Man, Daniel, Candle in the Wind, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, Saturday Nights Are Right for Fighting, Benny and the Jets, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, The Bitch Is Back, Philadelphia Freedom, Someone Saved My Life Tonight, Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word, and Crocodile Rock.
Crocodile Rock was ultra commercial pop record, which was intended to be a tongue-in-cheek takeoff of the American 50s thing, and it wasn't intended to me as a single anyway. It was just regarded as a joke. It's all a number you play for about 50 times and it drives you stark raving mad.
I remember when rock was young. Me and Susie had so much fun, holding hands and skimming stones. Had an old gold Chevy and a place of my own, but the biggest kick I ever got was doing a thing called the Crocodile Rock, while the other kids are rocking round the clock. We were hopping and bobbing to the Crocodile Rock. Well, Crocodile rockin', a song and shouting when your feet just can't keep still. I never knew me a better time, and I guess I never will. I love those Friday nights, the Susie wore just as tight, and the crowd rockin' brother out on the side.
America took to Elton from the start, and in early 1973, Crocodile Rock gave him his first US #1. Back in the UK, try as he might, Elton could never quite reach that elusive #1 spot in the British single charts. However, in 1976, Don't Go Breaking My Heart, a duet with his old friend, me, reached the coveted top slot.
I thought of the title, Don't Go Breaking My Heart, phoned Bernie in Barbados and said, listen, sang the song down the phone, the melody. I thought it'd be good for a duet because I'd always wanted to do a duet with her, but I hadn't been able to because I'd been on different record companies throughout the world. So this was the first album that I've ever been on, Blue Moves that is, that I was on my own record company and she was on my own record company. So I thought, oh great, let's do a duet. And so it was just worked out ideally. Again, it's really a fluke.
Oh, honey, when you knocked on my door, ooh, I gave you my key.
we laid down the track, and it may seem strange to anybody listening to the record now, but really the enthusiasm wasn't incredibly high for laying the track down at the time. It was like, oh God, all right, roll the tape, we'll do it, you know.
Gus Dudgeon.
And yet it came out sounding pretty good. Then, when we started to do the vocal overdubs, I came in one morning, Elton was already at the studio, and he had a big grin on his face. And he said, I've got a great idea. So I said, what? He said, well, you know, Don't Go Breaking My Heart. So I said, yeah. He said, how about doing as a duet with me and Kiki? And I thought about it, and I thought, that's a really great idea. And he said, look, run the tape, and I'll sing you the bit I've worked out that I could sing, and then the bit that she could sing. So he ran the tape, and he sang at least 90% of it, and I said, hey, wait a minute, if this is supposed to be a duet, you're supposed to do 50% maximum. So he kind of pulled a bit of a face, and I said, come on, let's have a look at the lyrics. So he went through the lyrics, and we scrubbed a few more lines out, and we changed a few yous to me's and a few him to her or whatever, I don't know, and we sorted it out. And then he laid down his part, and then he sang her part on a separate track. So he laid his part down as a master. Then we came back to England. We played her part, with Elton singing her part. And to distinguish between the two, I had his voice on the left of the stereo and hers on the right. And she literally learnt it in the studio and then did her part.
I have to tell you a wonderful story. Don't Go Breaking My Heart was number 8 in the American charts. It was sailing up the British top 10. And I called my mum in Yorkshire and I said, Mum, I know you've never flown, and I know you don't particularly like the idea, but will you come to New York first class on the plane, stay at the Waldorf Astoria for 1 week, come and see me perform every night at Madison Square Garden with Elton John, and sail back on the QE2? And she said, oh, love, we'd love to, but we've just booked our caravan holiday. Bless her. Anyway, she did come along in the end, and we had a fantastic time together. The 70s were undeniably Elton's decade, and as with Lennon and McCartney, it was not just the quality of the material Elton and Bernie Taupin produced that was astonishing, but also the sheer quantity. Even by the prolific standards of the day, Elton's contract with Dick James was unusually exacting, demanding that he deliver 3 complete albums of original material each and every year. And as well as an unrepeatable and unbeatable run of hit singles, the albums just kept on coming. Tumbleweed Connection, Madman Across the Water, Honky Chateau, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Elton rarely put a musical foot wrong, and many familiar songs from this period, including Tiny Dancer and Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, were never even released as singles.
I thought I knew, but now I know that rose trees never grow in New York City. Subway's no way for a good man to go down. Rich man can ride, and the hobo he can drown. And I thank the Lord for the people I have found. I thank the Lord for the people I have found. While Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, sons of bankers, sons of lawyers, turn around and say good morning to the night. For unless they see the sky, but they can, and that is why. They know not if it's dark outside or light. They know not if it's dark outside or light.
For many of Elton's fans, 1973's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was among their best-loved Elton albums.
It was originally going to be recorded in Jamaica, and I had my bee in the bonnet about doing it in Jamaica in the sunshine, and we all went over there with all the equipment, which cost a lot of money. We went to the studios, and I wrote all the songs literally in 3 days. I was in great form. And then we went into the studios to try and record it, and it was hopeless. You know, we couldn't get a good sound or anything, so we had to abandon things and go back to the chateau. And we went back there and did it more or less straight off. It was You know, because we'd rehearsed all the numbers in Jamaica anyway, so we all knew them. And it was a really nice album to make. We did 21 tracks, and 17 ended up on the double album. In fact, it was probably the most commercial album I've ever done.
Among the 17 tracks on the double album was the original Candle in the Wind, Bernie's poignant tribute to Marilyn Monroe.
I'd been a Marilyn fan for a long time, and ever since, I think, Madman Across the Water, I'd always wanted to write a song about her. And I'd never found the right sort of way of doing it, without being incredibly tacky. Well, Candle in the Wind is a phrase that's been used a few times. Okay, I'd admit that, that's a pinch, but it was just a nice phrase to use. Nobody used it in a song. So I built it around that, and I just tried to make it a song that told you that the reason that she was so popular is that she was to the people very much somebody that they could fall in love with without her being out of reach. And I really don't think that the majority of people thought of her as a sex symbol. They thought of her as a sex symbol, but not so much in a sort of, woo John way, woo, she's all right, woo. It was much more than that. It was much more of a sort of, put your arm around and give her a cuddle, make her feel good.
Goodbye, Norma Jean. No, I never knew you at all. You had the grace to hold yourself, but those around you crawled. They crawled out of the woodwork, and they whispered into your brain. They set you on the treadmill, and they made you change your name. And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never knowing who to cling to when the rain set in. And I would have liked to know you, but I was just a kid. Your candle burned out long before your legend ever did.
When Elton arrived on the scene in the wake of the progressive rock movement, his colourful costumes and exuberant performances were at odds with the aspirations of the prog rock brigade. Now, as his fame increased, Elton began to revel in the attention. Live on stage, the shy, plump Reg Dwight was banished, and Elton John was a sensation, pushing the boundaries of rock and roll performance to the limit. Before too long, Elton found himself being likened to a rock and roll Liberace.
I got to a point where I thought I'm writing too many songs that are American songs that deal with the American way of life. And I thought, well, I've got to get back to my own roots. I wanted to write something about the attitudes and the area and the sort of lifestyle I grew up with,
The stellar quality of the material Elton was writing with Bernie was the obvious key to his success. But his continuing preeminence also had much to do with the musical climate of the early 70s. The Beatles had broken up very publicly. The Stones were in tax exile, and Dylan was in mysterious seclusion.
Hello, this is Kiki D, and welcome to part 3 of the Elton John story. Only last month, Elton was recording a live album, One Night Only, at Madison Square Garden in New York. Well, we're very lucky to have Sir Elton here to tell us all about it. Madison Square Garden, a very special place for you to play, Elton.
Yes, it was, because Madison Square Garden is, I think, one of the best gigs in the world, if not the best. I know the building very well. It's great for sound. The 2 shows we did that meant it was my 51st sold-out show there, which equals the Grateful Dead. So, next year, hopefully, when I go on the tour with Billy Joel, we'll break that record. But it's something about Madison Square Garden and a New York audience. I feel very at home there. I love the building, and I just thought that would be the best place to do it.
You can never know what it's like. Blood like water, feeds you just like ice. There's only lonely light shine on me. What about the record you hide behind that mess you use? I think the things that folk will never win. But look at me, I'm coming back again. All the taste of love in a simple way. You don't know what I'm looking at. You just fade away. You know, I'm still dead. Hope to win, starting down the road, leaving me again. The threats you made were meant to cut me down. If love got the service, I can't count out now. You know, I'm still dead, dead on ever did. Feel like a true survivor, feel like a little kid. I'm still dead after all this time.
I can remember being at Madison Square Garden 26 years ago this month when John Lennon joined you on stage in what turned out to be his last public appearance.
I think of all the shows I've ever done, that night was probably stick in my mind as probably the most memorable and moving occasion. It was in 1974, and what had happened, and I did a track for, I think, Walls and Bridges, and a track called Whatever Gets You Through the Night. And I had a bet with John. I said, listen, if this gets to #1, you've got to come on stage with us. So, and it did get to #1, and so he kept his part of the bargain. And he came on stage, and I announced it, and I can remember it vividly. I mean, it was 10 minutes standing ovation. I've never heard so much noise. Very emotional. He was very, very scared coming on stage. He hadn't appeared live for so long. And it was just, we were in tears. And it was just the warmth and love, and it was incredible. And for anybody to play on stage with any one of the Beatles is like a dream come true. I mean, I never imagined in my whole life that I would ever be on stage performing with a Beatle, and I think I've done it with all 4 of them now. So that was just amazing. And because John had become a friend, and it was great for him to see how much the audience loved him. And we did 3 numbers. We did Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, we did I Saw Her Standing There, and Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Yeah.
Whatever gets you through the night, it's alright, it's alright. It's your money or your life, it's alright, it's alright. Don't need a salt, you come through flower. Oh no, oh no. Whatever gets you through your life, it's alright, it's alright. Do it wrong, now do it right. It's alright, it's alright. Don't need to watch you waste your time. Oh no, oh no.
To honour John Lennon, you chose to sing one of his songs at Madison Square last month.
Usually I play Empty Garden on the solo tour I've been doing Empty Garden, which was on the
Jump Up?
Jump Up album. And it's a really beautiful song. I wanted to do that in the solo show, and we do a little backdrop of some photographs of John, and it goes down really, really well. But I thought at the Garden I'd choose one of his songs from the Beatles era because I didn't want it to be too sad, and we chose Come Together because I've never played that and I've always wanted to play it. And a lot of people have covered that song in the past, but we just thought it would be a great idea.
Out of all the Beatles songs, what made that one stand out?
I think it's the lyrics. I mean, they're just weird lyrics, and it's just a very good song to play. I mean, it's got that real groove to it, and it's, you know, they're totally John's lyrics, and so even though it's a Lennon-McCartney composition, it's definitely a John Lennon song.
It's now Saturday, the 21st of October, and we're going backstage
At Madison Square Garden in New York.
Now, sound engineer Clive Franks, you've worked with Elton as long as I can remember. You must have been to some fantastic concerts over the years. What's the one that stands out for you?
The one that I remember the most, and I think the one that we all remember the most, was when John Lennon came on. I think that was just the most amazing feeling for everybody in the building. You know, I've never seen a standing ovation like it in my life. We were all completely stunned. It must have gone on for 10, 12 minutes. It was just incredible. It really was incredible. And for me as well, you know, I'm sitting at my mixing desk and I've got all my normal channels and everything, and I've got two channels. One says John Lennon's voice, John Lennon guitar, and there's me, the biggest Beatles fanatic. I was a true fan, and I was just overcome with the whole thing, you know. And it was brilliant. Yeah, that was a memory that will stand out forever for all of us. Shame he's not here now, actually.
Just before they go on, here's Davy Johnston, Elton's longtime guitarist. After all these years together, what was the best concert that you can remember?
Right here at the Garden in '74, which this is kind of almost an anniversary of. That was the most incredible feeling, because the show was already going great, but when John came on, the crowd went completely mad. I mean, the building was shaken severely. It was like an earthquake.
How was Elton when you first knew him?
How was he? Completely nuts, like he is now.
Not shy and retiring?
Shy and retiring. Actually, he was a little shy back then. Yeah, he was. In fact, he was very shy, very quiet. But I think a lot of performers are like that. You know, there's a lot of people who have that thing where they really just suddenly burst out into this maniac persona, as he does every time he walks out on stage, you know.
Has Elton changed a lot?
He has. He's a lot more subdued now. You know, he doesn't run a lot around the stage and do handstands off the piano like he used to, you know. But, you know, he's got a pacemaker, for Christ's sake. What do you expect? But, he, you know, he's a little more subdued, but he's still every bit as funny. And in my mind, every bit is great at a musician. If I could just say one thing, I wish he would rock a little bit more. I want him to make an album like the old Elton John albums that we used to make, you know, just go in the studio and lay a track down, and, you know, that'd be it. Leave all the mistakes on it, you know?
Have you ever been surprised by what he wears on stage?
Oh, many times. Are you kidding? Christ. Somebody who dresses up as a gorilla, you know, and a chicken suit was a good one. I think one of the funniest ones was this ridiculous outfit with a harness on it and a halter top, and this weird, tight little, how can I put it, almost like a scrum cap.
Sense of humour?
The thing that always makes me smile are his pseudonyms, because he always registers in a hotel under a different name everywhere he goes, and he's very, very creative with his use of names. Right now he's Ernie Ecclescake and his bum band, and what was he last week? He was Sir Beaver Snatchclit, I think, was one of the good ones. I think. we play a lot of word games on the road to keep laughing. You know, I mean, one day he came up to me and he said, "Wasp, monarch," and I kind of looked at him, going, what? And then I told him, "Oh, B.B. King." And from there, our game was sprung out. It was really funny, yeah. So.
Any special live favourites you always enjoy playing?
Well, in live situations like this, I obviously love things like Funeral for a Friend and Love Lies Bleeding, because they're really guitar heavy, and Saturday Night's Right for Fighting and Bitches Back and all that stuff. Cool, I've got to go on stage.
Yeah, I liked the way you opened the set last month.
In fact, at Madison Square Garden, when we did the show, the live concert, we started with the whole of side one of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, which was nice. It was. I haven't played Benny and the Jets or Candle in the Wind that early in a set since we made that album. So, to be honest with you, an album always sounds best if it's played on vinyl, because there's something about the vinyl and the sound from it. On vinyl through big speakers, it sounds quite amazing. It sounds much better than the CD.
Is it true that you actually sold off a lot of your collection?
I sold my record collection a few years ago, and the 8 tracks in it as well, to some guy in St. Louis who paid 250,000 quid for it, and it went to the AIDS Foundation. I went from 8-track to cassette and to CD. I just didn't have any more room to put the records, and I hated getting rid of them, but you know, what are you going to do? Put them in a warehouse? Someone else might as well get the use out of them. I'd rather they were being used than being stored.
We came from an era when LPs were 20 minutes a side, but now CDs are the norm.
Well, I think that's why CDs now, and people, you know, there's too much music on them sometimes. I think with Sting with Brand New Day, well, he did about 11 tracks for that, and I think that's about right. The temptation is to put too much on it, so you get 17 or 18 tracks and you're bored by the time you get to the 18th track.
Having written and recorded so many songs in the last 30 years, how on earth do you choose what songs you're going to do for a live album?
Well, we came up with about 40 songs, and then, you know, we'd have been there all night. I wanted to do things, and it's not made the album, but I wanted to do things like Little Genie, which was a #2 single in America, and just so never ever played it on stage. And then the rest kind of took care of themselves. I mean, when we didn't put in Leave On, we didn't put in Island Girl, we didn't put in Pinball Wizard, Believe and things like that. We just had to draw the line somewhere. To be honest, I left it to the office to sort it out, because I think sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees, and they can. So and the record company said these are the tracks that we like. And doing this album really was something I wasn't really keen on to start with, because you know, I've made 3 live albums before, 11, 17, 70 here and there, and then the Australian album with the orchestra. And but I've been having a kind of strained relationship with my American record company for a while, because in the last 3 or 4 years there's been a couple of takeovers, and I've been pushed from label to label. And I've been a kind of at war with them, and they said, listen, we'd really like this opportunity, and we like this. And I thought, well, I'm under contract to them. You know, sometimes it's always what you want and not what they want. And I thought, I'm going to do this to appease them and to make up, so that, you know, when the next album comes out, we're back to square one, and we're on good terms together. And by the time I actually got to rehearsing with the band, it was weird, because I was in Los Angeles putting down demos of songs for the new album with Bernie, on which there are 15 already down, and the band were rehearsing in Burbank in another studio for the album, and then I went to Atlanta and rehearsed with them, and we got to Madison Square Gardens. But it was odd for me to play with the band again, because I've done 165 shows on my own, on solo shows, and it was great. It was great fun. After, you know, I'm coming to the end this year. You know, the end of the year, we'll see the last of the solo shows, and then next year I'll be back with the band. And to be honest with you, it was a really needed fillip, because, you know, after doing 160 live shows on my own, it was great to be with the band. So it was quite exciting, and also having Nigel Olsson back in the band on drums and doing vocals was great for him and great for us and great for the fans. And you know, the band is a terrific band.
Daniel's one of my favourites, Elton. I'm glad he found room for that one.
Well, we played it a little faster on the show, and we turned it into more of a folky song. The only track I'm not keen on the album is Bitches Back, because by the time that comes out, I mean, it's like a thrash metal version of it, and it gets faster and faster, which sometimes happens when you're live. But with Daniel, we made a conscious effort just to speed it up just a bit and to make it into a more folky kind of thing.
Daniel is traveling tonight on a plane. I can see the red tape lights heading for Spain. And I can see Daniel waving goodbye. Oh, it looks like Daniel. It must be the cloud in my eye. They say Spain is pretty, though I've never been. And Daniel said that the best place he's ever seen. He should know he's been there enough. Oh, I miss Daniel. Oh, I miss him so much. Oh, Daniel, my brother, you are older than me. You still feel the pain of the scars that won't heal. Your eyes have died, but you see more than I. Daniel, you're a star in the face of the sky.
Matt Thomas, you're marketing director at Elton's label. Can you really release a live album in just under a month?
One of the reasons that we feel we can do this is Candle in the Wind 97 was put together in 7 days. And we've actually got about 3 weeks on this one. So it's something, I'm confident that we'll do it. It's a massive job, and it's taken a lot of hard work to get this far, but we're confident that we'll make it in time.
Daniel, my brother, you are older than me. You still feel the pain of the scars that won't heal. Your eyes have died, but you see more than I. Daniel, you're a star in the face of the sky. Daniel's traveling tonight on a plane, and I can see the empty lots heading for Spain. And I can see Daniel waving goodbye. Oh, it looks like Daniel. It must be the cloud in my eyes. Oh, God, it looks like Daniel. Must be the cloud in my eyes.
Derek McKillop is part of Elton's management team. Derek, what's your timescale for releasing this album?
Right, so we'll go through this logically. We've recorded Friday's show, we're going to record tonight, Saturday's show. Sunday we're going to do overdubs in the studio, so we're going to fix anything that we need to fix. We've only got one day to do that. Sunday night we're going to start mixing. Monday we're going to mix 5 tracks. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday we're going to mix 5 tracks. With 20 tracks we're then going to sequence the album. We're then going to master it on Saturday in Maine with Bob Ludwig. We're then going to courier 24-bit masters to every country in the world, and they will start manufacturing the record on Monday to make a 13th of November deadline. We will hopefully go out with about 1.5 million records.
When you perform a song like Candle in the Wind so many times, so often, how do you keep it fresh?
You have to approach things. I mean, I haven't played Candle in the Wind with the band for years. I mean, I've been doing it on my own for so long, but not the actual version of From Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. So you have to look at things, and you have to do them as was the record, but try and modernize them or do something different. Otherwise, you get bored out of your mind.
Goodbye, Norma Jean. Though I never knew at all, you had the grace to hold yourself with those around you crawl. They crawled out of the woodwork and they whispered into your brain. They set you on the treadmill and made you change your name. It seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind. They'll know who to cling to when the rain set in. Would like to love you, but I was just a kid. Your candle burned out long before the legend ever did.
In 1979, Elton became the first Western rock star to play a concert tour in the Soviet Union, which found him back in the USSR. At those historic shows, Elton appeared solo on stage, accompanied only by percussionist Ray Cooper.
And that was extraordinary, because there was an audience that, after all, had extremely wonderful cultural reference points. That their music had been, Prokofiev and Stravinsky and all sorts of wonderful things. This is, the war was still out, the Cold War, etc. Well, Perestroika was in the glasnost and all that lot was in the wind. We weren't quite there yet, so it's still the old regime. But of course they were very hungry and desperate for rock and roll. They loved it. They heard it on Forces Radio and people passed records around. But when we got there and we started the first performance, they sat very still and quiet and they listened, which I think initially Elton was quite worried about, because I was delighted, because I knew this was a signal they really were listening. And of course at the end of the performance there were rapturous applause, and there were the men in blue serge suits trying to control that. The second concert they disappeared and they let the crowd do what they wanted to do, which was overwhelmingly emotional. It was wonderful.
Your accountant called this morning. There was springtime in his heart. He couldn't wait to tell me how he put our lives apart. And the letter from the lawyer lies unopened on the tray. I'ma get around to reading it later today.
His first collaboration with Sir Tim Rice.
Walking round the lonely rooms, I see everything the same. But suddenly it matters what was purchased in my name. Whether this or that was paid for belongs to me or you. Having 7 years together be divided by two.
To see Elton in Paris, and he played me what he'd done to the songs, which I thought were great. He only actually recorded one of them, but I was very thrilled that the track made the album. One time I was hoping he might be in line for a single, but it was not to be.
Sir Tim Rice.
There was a serious gap between The Legal Boys, which was just one song in 1981, I think, and The Lion King, which was 10 years later when I first approached Elton. In fact, it was definitely 1991.
When Disney were going to do The Lion King, they asked him who he would like to write with, and he said, well, I'd like Elton John to do it. And they said, oh, you'll never get him. And he said, yes, I will.
And then I got a call from Elton saying, I've been approached by Disney, what is all this? And I explained that it was a film which might require 5 or 6 numbers, and I thought it was probably going to be quite successful, as Little Mermaid had been. And he said, well, I'm afraid what they're offering is a joke, and I can't possibly do it. And I said, well, I fully understand, I appreciate that. And then about a week later, I got a call saying I am doing it. So I don't know what went on, but I was obviously thrilled.
I was immediately interested, because it was a different, writing animation for animation and Walt Disney. And a lot of people, not the Walt Disney Company, I don't get it. But anyway, those films are around forever because they are the best at it. And I jumped at the chance, having seen the storyboard and the story. It was the first time Disney had ever done a story from scratch. Usually they, pick up famous stories and do animation films of those. So I was very interested, and I've been a friend of Tim's for a long time. I really liked him, and
very quickly, Elton threw himself into the project, and he'll admit to you that he didn't have to spend as much time on it as I did, because I was going to LA twice a month almost, or once a fortnight, you could put it. I was going over there a lot, and really, even though I was, in one sense, only writing the lyrics, they kept changing, and the plot kept changing, and I was very much involved with this huge team of people who were working on the story, and by now it had become The Lion King, and bits were being animated, and we began writing songs, and I would write the lyrics and send them off to Elton, and 2 or 3 days later with a CD would come back. And of course it worked really well. It was a long process for me. It took 3 or 4 years for the movie to go from that bit of paper and the King of the Jungle to become The Lion King, and it came out in 1994. And I remember very clearly that Can You Feel the Love Tonight, which was the first song we wrote together, we wrote that before dear Freddie Mercury died in 1991. And so it was 3 years, that song, which of course went on to win the Oscar and become one of his biggest hits.
There's a calm surrender to the rush of day, when the heat of a rolling wave can't be turned away. An enchanted moment, and it sees me through. It's enough for this restless warrior just to be with you. And can you feel the love tonight? Is where we are. It's enough for this wide-eyed wanderer that we got this far. And can you feel the love tonight? How it's led to rest. It's enough to make kings and vagabonds believe the very best.
The way Elton and I worked was miles and miles away from the concept of 2 guys around a piano, which I've never really gone for. I mean, you can't. If you write lyrics, you want to write them in silence. You can't have a bloke tinkling in the corner, even if it is Elton John. And in any case, Elton likes the lyrics first, so I had to go to a quiet place, write the lyric, knowing roughly what sort of tune it might be, that it was a ballad or a rocker, but not having a clue how it would end up. And I would write a lyric and then send it off to Elton, and it would come back 3 or 4 days later, usually on a beautifully recorded CD, almost sounding like a finished single. Elton singing my words, which was really exciting. Yes, it was terrific to win the Oscars. Our songs were very much a vital reason why the film was so big. It wasn't just quite big, it was mega. And I don't think Disney had had a #1 album with one of their animated films ever.
Hakuna Matata. What a wonderful phrase. Hakuna Matata. Ain't no passing craze. It means no worries for the rest of your days. It's our problem-free philosophy. Hakuna Matata.
3 of the songs, in the end there were only 5 songs in the film, 3 of them became standards almost immediately. I mean, the 2 big ones, Can You Feel the Love Tonight and Circle of Life, and Hakuna Matata, which that's a phrase that has entered playgrounds, and we're very proud of it.
Why, when he was a young warthog. When I was a young warthog. Very nice. Thanks.
Having been successful at that project, and which opened the doors to me doing film scores for The Muse and Women Talking Dirty, it also paved the way for the Lion King stage show, which is an enormous success. It's on in New York, London, Tokyo, Toronto, Los Angeles. God knows where else.
After The Lion King, the two of you tackled an opera classic, Verdi's Aida.
The Aida thing, which I was very excited about, because it was already written as a huge opera and one of the famous operas ever written by Verdi, and because the story again appealed to me. And I thought, well, we're hiding to nothing here. If we do Aida, and we're going to get criticised for doing it anyway because of Verdi, but I thought, that's dangerous, let's do it.
So we sat down to write an entire musical, which is, song-wise, is a bigger target than a film. And over the next few months, we wrote most of the score. But it's been a long slog. We've had 5 years. This has been the typical, agonies and ecstasies of creating a big show. And Disney asked us, I guess 5 years ago now, 1995, 6, after The Lion King's success. The initial idea, as I remember it, was that we would write a follow-up animated film to The Lion King. I mean, there had been other ones by other people, but this would be the Elton Tim follow-up. And they suggested the story of Aida, the Egyptian prince and the Nubian slave. And then they said, would you like to do a stage show instead? Because Disney theatricals is now getting really successful. Beauty and the Beast, Lion King is in preparation, and we'd love to do an original musical.
And the great thing about Disney is we tried it out first, and there was a production in Atlanta which wasn't, the music was great, but the production wasn't, and Disney's closed the whole thing down, kept the two main lead girls, and said, we believe in this so much, we're going to start this again and get a new director. So they got Robert Falls, who won the Tony for Death of a Salesman as best director, and Bob Crowley came in to do the sets, Wayne Cilento came in to do the choreography. We had a whole new team of people, and it started out in Chicago, and then we went to New York, and there, I learned a lot. I learned a lot that it's a 5-year sort of regime that ended up on Broadway, and 3 weeks before it was still not right. But on the actual night, the opening night, everything was fixed. It was great, and even still, I mean, went back last week or 2 weeks ago to see it, and they're still fine tuning it.
At the time of speaking, sort of late 2000s. Nobody in England really knows much about it, but it has been a thumping great hit in New York, and nobody's aware of this. People say, what have you been doing lately? And I say, well, I've done this show, Aida, and they look blankly.
And I'm so proud of it. I've seen it 13 or 14 times now. It's a huge success. It got horrible reviews from the New York press, mainly because I think that there's a thing about Disney, they just hate them. We got great reviews throughout the country and in magazines like Time and Newsweek and stuff, and even the Times paper here. And I was so proud of that, more proud of that than The Lion King, because that really is Julie Taymor's vision. So this is something that Tim and I wrote from start to finish, and it's the #2 show on Broadway next to The Lion King. So I'm very, very happy about it. And working with Disney people, no other company after the first production of Folded would have stood by their writers, but they've stood by us, and I can't thank them enough. And that has been one of the most joyous things of the last few years, is the Aida, seeing that being so successful.
We'd had a few traumas. Elton famously walked out of one show, one preview. But it was going down really well with the audiences. I had reservations about aspects of the show, and if I'm honest, I still do. But there's no denying that it worked with the audiences. The only bigger hit on Broadway at the moment is The Lion King, and that's only because it's in a bigger theatre. So Elton and I have, to our amazement, written a smash hit musical. I think the songs of Aida are terrific songs, and I don't think all of them have yet had the exposure they deserve. I think one day Elton's studio albums will come out as a box set or something. I felt with one or two of the tracks on the Aida studio album that, frankly, the songs were not done any favours by the artists. No names, no backdrop. Whereas Elton's studio demos of the songs, I play them so much still for fun. They're just wonderful. And I think the Broadway cast album illustrates the songs much better than that studio album did. There are one or two fine tracks on it. Lulu did very well. That was a great track. Ironically, that song got dropped from the show. It wasn't because it was a bad song at all. It was one of my favourites. In fact, my daughter's favourite of all. A song called The Messenger. It was dropped because it was felt that we needed to end the show quicker.
Everything Then the voices railed against us. Then the path was steep. Now the sounds are softer. Now the road is ended. In your arms asleep. Turn away from madness. Burn me in a light. Pray for me as cheerfully as I slip into the night. Death is just a prisoner watching for a while. Sullen and predictable. Love is versatile.
But it was great. The Messenger, yeah, I love doing it. And of course, we went into the studio. This is typical of him. He's got so much energy. He says, okay, I'll be at the studio at 10:30. I said, okay, I'll be there, I'll see you there. So I'd get there at 10. If it was 10 o'clock, I got there at sort of 9:45. He'd already done his part. He'd been in 15 minutes before me and done it. And I thought, it's typical of him, you know, he's so quick. And then I went in and I did mine fairly quickly, and by lunchtime we were both listening to the rest of the album.
You're listening to the Elton John Story on BBC Radio 2 with me, Kiki D.
Mr. Bryan Adams.
Brian, what's your favourite Elton album?
Madman Across the Water. Remember that album playing endlessly. Well, the thing about Elton is that was the thing that astounded me even back in the 70s, was that they were all hits. They were hits then, and they're hits now, so...
Brian, when I saw you rehearsing this afternoon in your blue jeans, I had the confidence to wear my leather trousers this evening. What do you think of Elton's wardrobe?
Well, you don't ever know what Elton's going to wear when he comes on stage. Tonight it's very fluorescent. Yesterday was a little more subdued. I'm going neutral. I think it's better to be Switzerland in this case. He's never said anything to me about my attire. He's passed no comment, and I think that's fair enough.
Ronan Keating.
Ronan, how did it go last night?
It was really nerve-wracking. You know, I've done a lot of big shows and I've played to 120,000 people, and in fairness, nobody out there really knows who I am. But to me, it was one of the most nerve-wracking shows I've ever done. My knees went from under me, my mouth was bone dry. I was in bad shape. You know, I hope tonight's a little easier for me so I can, you know, give it 120% and nail it this time.
Have you learned anything from Elton?
Well, what I've learned from Elton is, you know, is about patience. You know, he's still doing it and releasing hit records after all this time, and he's still loving it. You know, that's something to go by, definitely.
Have you always been an Elton fan?
Oh, well, who hasn't been an Elton fan? You know, when he sings the songs like, you know, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, or Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, or, you know, your song, which is my favourite, which I get to perform with him, it's unbelievable. It's an honour.
What's it like for Elton John listening to one of your own songs on the radio?
Yeah, you go back and you think, oh, that doesn't sound too bad. Because I never sit at home playing my records. I mean, when you make a new album, you sit in the car and you listen to it and you're excited, and then you forget about it, apart from the songs that you choose to play on stage. But when you do hear something on the radio that's one of your records, you think, oh, that's not so bad. That was recorded 30 years ago. It sounds pretty good. And then also when you hear someone else singing one of your own songs and covering them, I don't care who does them. You know, sometimes... You know, I always think it's the biggest compliment to a writer, and that's what Bernie and I essentially started out as writers, to get people covering your songs.
I really enjoyed your version of, I guess that's why they call it The Blues, with Mary J. Blige. Did you have a clear idea of who you were going to ask to do your concert at Madison?
I think one of the thrills at the Garden was to... we made up our mind to have fun. If we were going to do this, we were going to have fun. We were going to surround ourselves with friends like Kiki D.
Oh, thank you.
Billy Joel, Bryan Adams, Ronan, and this girl Anastasia, who I've been championing since January and February this year, and Mary J. Blige, who I adore. And that we chose those people, and that made it even more enjoyable for us.
Yeah, I was in my dressing room and I remember hearing Mary J. Blige singing, I guess that's why they call it the blues, which sounded really good.
You know, Mary J. Blige's version of I guess that's why they call it the blues. I first heard that at the Grammys. They did a Music Cares tribute to me, which a lot of people came on stage and sang my songs. And she did that, and I was blown away. So when we chose her to sing at the Garden, and we did the duet together, oh my God. I mean, it was quite astonishing. She was like Aretha Franklin. And I adore her as a person, and I adore her as an artist. And I just said, I gave her a little note and card, thank you note, saying, you know, this, you've only just started. This is, could be such a huge artist. She's just amazing. So shy and so kind of humble, but God, she sings like an angel.
Please, put your hands together for Miss Mary J. Blige.
Don't wish it away. Don't look at it like it's forever. Between you and me, I can honestly say that things will only get better. And while I'm away, dust out the demons inside, and it won't be long before you and me run to a place in our heart where we hide, yeah. And I guess that's why they call it the blues. I'm on my head to be time spent with you, laughing like children, living like lovers, rolling like thunder under the
When we were on the plane the other day, you were reeling off loads of new artists. You're very well up on what's happening, aren't you, on the music scene?
Well, there's a new album I've just got by a guy called Ryan Adams, not Brian Adams, which is so brilliant and so beautiful that I'm just going crazy about it. And the more you play it, and in fact, Timothy White in Billboard did a whole page about it. I got the album, listened to it, and I can't stop playing it. It's very folksy, beautiful, kind of Jeff Buckley-ish, Bob Dylan-ish. But this guy, it's probably the most beautiful album of the year. I think, you know, the most exciting album of the year was the Eminem album, and this is probably the most beautiful album. It's just incredible. So it's not Brian Adams, it's Ryan Adams. Just take the B off and go and buy the album.
Your guitarist, David Johnston, told me in New York that your next studio album is a return to the vintage Elton John of Tumbleweed Connection and Madman Across the Water days.
Yeah, it's very basic. Piano, bass, drums, guitar, not many overdubs, simple. I mean, when I mentioned the Ryan Adams record earlier, it was a very simple record. This features much more piano, and we went for simplicity and strength of songs. And there's a song in there called American Triangle, which is probably one of the finest I've ever written with Bernie. It's a song about the death of Matthew Shepard. And people say, oh no, he's not writing about someone else who's died. But it's, you know, I felt so moved by that horrific murder that, you know, I did a concert in Laramie and you know, quite close to his parents, and it affected me deeply. So we wanted to write a song. But the other songs on the album, I'm so pleased with. They're back to very. You know, we just concentrated on the songs. And Bernie came to visit me in Nice during the summer, and we worked hard on the production of this album, more than so in the last 3 or 4 albums. And Pat Leonard producing, and he just got it absolutely right. So I'm very happy with it so far.
Is your way of working with Bernie Taupin the way it always was?
Yeah, I mean, he showed me the lyrics in France. He came over with 80 lyrics, which is an enormous amount for him, and he's been writing for 2 years. And you know, I just go in and see which one works and which one doesn't on the day. I come back to some, and you know, and that's still the way it's done. But he was in the studio all the time, but he wasn't there when I was writing, and I would call him in after I'd written it. And so that's the way it's always been.
I've heard you say that you get bored writing after about 15 minutes.
About maximum 30 minutes, and then I go on to something else. And we tape everything, so you know, if there's something I like, we can go back to it and find it. But yeah, if I haven't got it down in 30 minutes, I abandon it or come back to it the next day.
Most of us were very happy with our performances last night, but Elton suddenly announced that he was retiring.
How many times have we heard this? I mean, I think he won't mind me saying that. I said that to him this morning. I said, "Are we retiring today?" And he said, "Don't be silly."
We want to thank you for being such a great audience. I love this place. And last night we had a bit of a bad technical night, and things kept going wrong, which always throws you off, and you're nervous because you're recording. So I said I was going to retire next year, but of course I'm full of shit.
And hopefully the live album will be coming, I think in 3 weeks. It's from recording it into the shops, which I think may be a world record, I don't know. That will hopefully, you know, go through next year, and we'll take some singles off that. Maybe one with Ronan. There's a single in America with Mary J. Blige. We'll see how that goes, but not sure when the new studio album's coming out yet. I've got to do some more writing for it, and I'm going to write about 25 songs, record 25 songs, and then choose from that. There's no rush.
I suppose the British equivalent of Madison Square Garden is Wembley Stadium, and I know you've got a bit of a soft spot for it.
I was asked to do some songs at the last night at Wembley, which was a dinner for the. It was money was going for the NSPCC, and I said yes immediately because, you know, emotionally I've played there so many times. Being a football club chairman, I've been there at the cup final. My cousin won a cup winners medal for Nottingham Forest there. So, you know, and those twin towers have symbolised something in my life which has been quite, you know, sacred, kind of awesome. Actually playing the first show I ever did at Wembley Stadium was just terrifying. But I mean, just to be playing there. And I'm a local boy. I come from Pinner, so Wembley is very local. And I jumped at the chance. I did about 6 numbers, and Pele was there, and it was, you know, I've met him before, and it was a huge honour to be asked to entertain at that night. It was a really good night, and sad in a way to see. I mean, progress must go on, and we do need a new national stadium. But if I was asked to be part of something that meant so much to me, I immediately said yes.
Diligent piano student and tiresome celebrity, addictive personality, an effortlessly fluent musician, outrageous showman on stage and insecure off stage. A man capable of gross examples of superstar petulance, but equally capable of enormous generosity. There have been times when Elton John seemed little more than a mass of contradictions, held together by a Versace suit, all captured in the candid fly-on-the-wall profile, tantrums and tiaras.
He's a very open, funny guy.
Phil Collins.
Of course, I actually could not watch the TV show, you know, Tiaras and Tantrums. I mean, I got a copy of it because I'd heard about it, and I watched the first 2 minutes of it, and I had to turn it off because I just couldn't watch him like that. And I can believe that he can be an absolute bastard.
Manager Derek McKillop.
He's actually very funny and very warm, very generous. He is also capable of the odd tantrum. Let's just put it that way.
Ronan Keating.
He's great. He's an inspiration to work with. You know, he just gets up there, knows what he's doing. He gets straight to the point, and it's easy. You know, it's great.
Sound engineer Clive Franks.
It's great. It's fun. You know, he's a great person to work with, and yeah, long may it go on.
Sir Cliff Richard.
Any American that does know me doesn't know my name, but if I sing them a few bars of Devil Woman, they go, "Hey, you're the guy that recorded that?" I go, "Yeah," and they immediately want to know about Elton.
Matt Thomas, marketing manager at Mercury Records.
People are beginning to realise what a true superstar he is in every sense of the word, from the performance side of it to the writing side of it, and I think the next few years are going to be really, really exciting.
Victoria Beckham.
He's still quite sort of outgoing, you know, that's his character, but he's just a really nice, kind guy, and you know, maybe you don't see that all the time. You know, he's a perfectionist at what he does. Do you know what? He can totally shop me under the table any day, and you know, he's great at shopping. I mean, he knows how to spend a lot of money.
George Michael.
You know, he was a childhood hero of mine, but I remember meeting him and being just totally kind of, I can't believe that I'm sitting here having lunch in a vineyard with Elton John.
Kate Bush.
I was such a big fan of Elton's when I was little. I really loved his stuff. He was my biggest hero, really, and when I was just starting to write songs, he was the only songwriter that I knew of that played the piano and sung and wrote songs. So he was very much my idol.
Jules Holland.
Of course, Elton invented his own style, really, and the idea of singer-songwriter sitting at the piano is sort of one of Elton's creations. And the other thing is, of course, he can sit and play all sorts of songs, you know. Just if you sat, he could just play songs for hours on end, brilliantly, you know, different versions, different people's songs, you know.
Long John Baldry.
Every time he writes a song, there is something wonderful and graceful and magical in what he writes. Phenomenal player. I've always thought his biggest strength was more his actual piano playing and keyboard playing in general, actually more so than his singing.
Ray Cooper.
Of course, we're talking about one of the most outrageous performers of his time, and I think that with us, especially on the two-man show, I think that the joy of that show was the total trust in each other's taste, ability and loyalty.
Sir Tim Rice.
I can truthfully say that Elton and I have never had a crossword. He's always been charming, you know, as we've become good friends. He's been a wonderful host, very generous, you know, very entertaining. We don't only talk about music, he's got many other interests as well, so it's great. It's a great privilege to know him.
Lulu.
I mean, his writing is so diverse because he can play anything on the piano, absolutely anything. And if you ever go to see him in concert where he plays just with piano, you almost feel that there is an orchestra there when there isn't. It's him on the piano. And he's just, I mean, as a musician, he's so accomplished. And then he's great, this great sort of character, funny personality. He's just unique. There's nobody like Elton, let's face it.
He is a unique man, known from the Northwood Hills to Beverly Hills simply as Elton. And so, incredibly, 25 years after we first sang together, here we are, still not breaking each other's hearts. In the words of one of Elton's favourite bands, the Grateful Dead, what a long, strange trip it's been. On into the 21st century, Elton sings those sad songs, which still say so much. I'm Kiki D. The programme was written by Patrick Humphreys, produced by Mark Farrar, and the series editor was Graham Pass.